While packing her husband for a business trip, a woman accidentally found 2 tickets to a resort, and deciding to follow him. We welcome you to our channel and invite you to watch the video with our new original story. Valentina was finishing work when her husband called and told her that he was being sent on another unplanned business trip. He needed to fly tomorrow. "The tickets are already bought, the hotel is booked," he said into the phone. Valentina cursed under her breath. Another business trip. They had planned to go to the waterfalls with friends this weekend. What, postpone everything again? Business trips at Esteban's work had started happening far too often. Every month there was a new one, and of course, urgent. She stacked the student notebooks, slammed shut the class journal, and taking it under her arm, stood up. She walked to the door and went out into the corridor. "What, is there no one else to send, Esteb?" she asked with displeasure. "You're always their lifesaver. I was so hoping that at least this weekend we could escape somewhere." "I don't just agree for no reason. It's extra money. Won't that help us? We have an open loan hanging over us. You haven't forgotten? I'd like to pay it off as quickly as possible." "But you can't earn all the money in the world," Valentina parried, turning the key in the classroom door. She tugged on the handle, checking if it was locked, and walked down the deserted school corridor toward the teacher's lounge, clicking rapidly on her heels. "When will you be home?" Esteban asked. "I want to arrange a romantic dinner with you." "I'll just leave the journal in the teacher's lounge and head out," Valentina softened. "What's for dinner?" "What would you like, my queen? Tamales, empanadas, arepas?" "Let's have tamales," Valentina chose. When she arrived home, the table was already set. Twisted red candles were burning, casting trembling reflections on the elegant wine glasses. Esteban met his wife in the hallway, put her shoes in place. Valentina sat down on the ottoman, pleasantly massaging her tired feet. At work, she always tried to dress elegantly so as not to look like a typical teacher. She was afraid of becoming like her colleagues, gray, unremarkable, with ridiculous makeup and bright lipstick. "You're the most beautiful," Esteban whispered, looking directly into her eyes. "I never would have thought I'd marry a queen." "Stop it," Valentina laughed. "I only have a royal name." Going into the living room, her husband gestured for her to join him and extended his hand palm up. "Please?" She placed her hand in his and stood up. The evening turned out great. They drank wine, chatted, listened to music, and danced. Only one thing dampened Valentina's mood: her husband's departure tomorrow. She would get distracted, forget about it for a while, and then suddenly remember and look sadly at Esteban. "It's not a universal tragedy, of course," she said, "but I so want to go to the waterfalls. And now I have to call everyone, postpone the meeting, or cancel it altogether." "Don't cancel," Esteban shook his head. "We'll definitely go, everywhere you want." "And to Buenos Aires," Valentina squinted slyly. "I want to go to Buenos Aires." "And to Buenos Aires," Esteban nodded seriously. "And to Lima, because I want to go to Lima." They laughed in unison. The flight was scheduled for 8 in the morning, so Esteban decided to pack his bags in the evening. Valentina sadly watched him, sipping the remains of white wine from her glass. "Let me help, maybe." Esteban's phone just rang. "From work," he said, and left the room. Valentina sighed and began folding shirts. Threw shaving gel and aftershave cream into the suitcase, phone charger, put the laptop and notebook with pen on top. Again, that melancholy scratched somewhere in her soul. She didn't want to let her husband go. They had started spending so little time together. Either Valentina was at work or Esteban was on business trips. They saw each other maybe once a week. She couldn't even remember when they had spent time together, alone, just enjoying each other's company and not being distracted by work or household chores. Esteban's work briefcase was standing on the computer chair. She needed to put it next to the suitcase, or Esteban would forget again. This had happened before. She took the briefcase by the handle. The clasp turned out to be open, and the briefcase opened. Some papers fell out of the inner pocket and scattered like a fan across the floor. Valentina sighed and crouched down and began gathering them into a pile. And suddenly she came across 2 tickets. Amazed, she took them and looked at the destination. A business trip to the sea? Strange. And suddenly, an unpleasant understanding came like lightning. Her husband wasn't going on a business trip at all, but on vacation. And not alone, but with someone. There were 2 tickets, but with whom? And why didn't he tell the truth? Because he has another woman. Valentina shook her head, not wanting to agree with this thought. No, he can't have another woman. She and Esteban love each other. He would never cheat. They have everything perfect, just like in the movies. They have real love. At least that's what she thought. A thought slithered in like a snake. You made all this up. There's no love between you. You can't even bear him a child. Look at yourself. Who are you? A simple teacher in a middle school, without talents, without zest. An ordinary woman. And Esteban, tall, stately, with a charming, broad smile that Hollywood stars would envy. Good job. Lately earning more and more. Smart. Any woman would latch on to such a man. Bitter tears welled up in her eyes, but Valentina quickly blinked them away and swallowed the lump that rose in her throat. Esteban would return to the room soon. He mustn't find her in tears. She didn't want to sort things out at all. Valentina was above that. But when her husband fell asleep, she still took his phone. There were no compromising correspondences there, but she did find a hotel reservation. She memorized the name. She returned the phone to its place, got into bed and couldn't fall asleep until morning. With dawn came a firm, unshakable decision. She needed to follow Esteban to find out what was happening, to confirm her suspicions or refute them. She was consumed by sticky, disgusting fear. What if he really had another woman? What then? Valentina wanted and at the same time feared to learn the truth. But she understood. She could no longer live in ignorance. She couldn't pretend she hadn't seen anything. Those damn tickets had divided their peaceful, harmonious life into before and after. In the morning, Esteban, suspecting nothing, had breakfast, took a shower, and began getting ready. "What city are you going to?" Valentina asked. She still cherished the hope that his trip to the seaside city was really for work. "To the neighboring one," Esteban smiled. "Nothing new." "I see," Valentina whispered, feeling a wave of resentment and pain rising inside her again. "To the neighboring one, then, and not to a resort at all." "But why are the tickets to a resort, then?" Esteban looked intently at her face. "Are you upset?" "Of course," Valentina answered and smiled with effort. "Now I won't see you for a week." Esteban hugged her tightly, stroked her tangled hair. "Soon we'll be together again. Be patient a little bit." Valentina nodded, squeezed her eyes shut so as not to let the tears spill. Her head was spinning from fatigue, lack of sleep, emotional pain. She swallowed a pill, but it didn't help, and she still needed to go to work. When the door closed behind Esteban, she somehow got herself together, put on makeup, got dressed. Her appearance, of course, left much to be desired. Red eyes swollen from unshed tears, trembling lips, circles under her eyes as if she'd been on a drinking binge. Valentina applied more concealer and foundation, thickly powdered her face. Well, that looked better. Her best friend and colleague, Camilla, immediately noticed her condition. "You look all disheveled." "What happened?" "Nothing." "Come on, spill," Camilla demanded. "I need to get to class," Valentina mumbled. "Let's talk later." She took the class journal, smoothed her hair in front of the mirror. "Okay," Camilla agreed. "Let's go to my place after work. We'll talk." Valentina, without answering, slipped out the door. She didn't want to talk to anyone, even Camilla. It seemed to her that if she spoke her thoughts aloud, all her suspicions would become reality. But this way they were just guesses, the ravings of an inflamed, tired brain. The day dragged on painfully long. Before the last lesson, Valentina went to the principal, asked to be given unpaid leave. "For family circumstances," she explained. "Write it up." The principal nodded and inquired, "Did something happen to you?" "Yes, something happened to me," Valentina articulated, taking a clean sheet from her desk. Her hand was trembling. Thoughts in her head were hopelessly confused, and she managed to write the application correctly only on the third try. The principal silently signed it and stuck it in a thick cardboard folder, nodded just as silently. Valentina walked to the door, sharply yanked the handle. She was suffocating. The air had suddenly become thick and viscous. She couldn't take a full breath. In the corridor, she opened the window vent and stood silently for some time, leaning her hands on the narrow windowsill painted with white paint. She needed to pull herself together. Camilla appeared from somewhere, put her hand on her shoulder. Valentina slammed the vent shut and, turning to her friend, unexpectedly began to cry. Tears just ran down her cheeks, and she began hurriedly wiping them away with her fingertips. "Poor you," Camilla said and hugged her. "Tell me already, what happened to you?" "Something with Esteban?" Valentina nodded. "Just not here." They walked toward the exit. In the empty corridor, the hollow echo of their steps resounded. They passed the spacious foyer filled with heavy planters with indoor trees. Went outside. The sun was blazing with full force, flooding the schoolyard with its blinding light. Valentina inhaled the warmed air through her nose. May this year had turned out surprisingly hot, as never before in their latitudes. Flowers were blooming in full on the lawns. Bees were buzzing. Valentina tried to collect her thoughts, but again failed. Esteban went to the sea. Alone? Camilla was surprised. Without you? Valentina shook her head and began crying again. No, not alone. Camilla took her by the elbow, turned her toward herself, and looked into her eyes silently for some time. Yes, things are bad, she finally said. Let's go to my place now. You'll talk it out, and then... She didn't finish. They quickly walked across the schoolyard. Camilla's car was parked right at the gates. She pulled the keys from her bag, pressed the button. The car beeped. The door locks clicked. The highway was filled with cars. Valentina mindlessly looked ahead, immersed in her own thoughts. They jumped at a frantic pace from one to another and back. Usually confident in herself, she felt broken and depressed. Fatigue was washing over her, squeezing her temples with pulsating pain. She wanted to throw everything out of her head, but couldn't. Where is Esteban now? With whom? Why did he do this? Why? He deceived me. At home, Camilla took a bottle of wine from the kitchen cabinet. It's daytime, Valentina tried weakly to refuse. What wine? Camilla turned the bottle label toward herself. Red, semi-dry, she answered and put it on the table. You need it now to let off steam, so come on. She took 2 glasses with long, elegant stems from the shelf, uncorked the wine, and filled them almost to the brim. The wine sparkled like a ruby, mesmerized, attracted the eye. Valentina took a careful sip. Pleasant sweetness spread across her tongue. Well, how is it? Delicious, Camilla laughed. Camilla, I don't understand why he did this, Valentina said quietly, holding out her glass for a new portion of wine. Everything was fine with us. At least I thought so. Well, you know, men are generally strange creatures, Camilla replied. Even acknowledged beauties get cheated on. Look at the stars, they have such wives. The whole country would dream of marrying them, but they still run around on the side. I'm not interested in stars, I'm interested in why Esteban lied to me. Well, let's say it's not a fact that he has a mistress. Camilla raised an eyebrow. Who knows what reason he had for not telling you he was going to the sea? What other reason could there be? Valentina exclaimed and drank the second glass in one gulp. Just like that, he just up and decided to spend vacation without me. Why not? Maybe he wanted to rest? You need to rest from relationships too. Well, he would have told me. I would have understood. Camilla squinted her made-up eyes. Are you sure you would have understood? Valentina thought about it, and indeed that was true. What if he was just afraid to tell her that he wanted to be alone, to take, as they say, a time out in the relationship? Here's what you should do, Camilla said. Buy a ticket to the same place and see if he's alone or with someone. Do you know exactly where he went? Yes, I saw the hotel reservation. Well then, go buy a ticket right now and book a room at the same hotel. They won't tell me which room he's in, Valentina doubted. They will. You're his wife, Camilla answered confidently. Come on, I'm telling you. Buy the ticket. Valentina obeyed, took her smartphone and went to the airline website. The tickets weren't cheap. Tourist season was beginning, and for a short second she hesitated. Camilla, seeing her hesitation, repeated, Buy it already. Why are you hesitating? I somehow don't know, Camilla. Why should I go there? What if I see him with another woman? You know, as one poet once said, only ignorance about betrayal can be worse than betrayal itself. So drop your doubts. It's better to see everything with your own eyes. How will you live with eternal suspicions? Take one swing of the sword and that's it. If he's cheating, then divorce. If not, then everything's fine. I wouldn't hesitate in your place. You've convinced me, Valentina mumbled. The next day at 6 in the morning, she was standing at the check-in counter for the flight. Valentina took minimal things. After all, she wasn't flying to have fun and swim in the sea. The girl behind the counter handed her the boarding pass and passport with a sweet smile. Do you have baggage? No, only carry-on. She picked up her small travel bag and walked to the right gate. She sat down on a long bench, took out her phone, quickly typed a message to her husband. How are things? He replied in 10 minutes. Everything's fine, working like you. Not sad? Valentina smiled grimly. No, working too. She closed the messenger and stared straight ahead with an unseeing gaze. Well, we'll find out how you're working there, she thought. And where? In the office or in bed? That disgusting fear rolled over her again, entangled her insides with its sticky tentacles. Valentina lifted her chin. No way. She wouldn't cry and shake like a leaf in the wind anymore. Enough. She was already sick of herself, dissolved in tears like a delicate maiden, plunged headfirst into resentment. She needed to find out the truth and end this once and for all. Camilla was right. It's better to know about betrayal than not to know. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed that a man sitting next to her was looking at her with interest. But she didn't pay attention. She was used to male attention. Only out of habit she fixed her hair, glanced in the mirror to see if her lipstick had smeared, if her mascara had run. An attractive woman with raven black hair looked back at her from there. Against their background, her face was aristocratically pale. Her lips stood out as a red spot. Valentina knew how to look striking and knew it. She snapped the mirror shut, put it in her bag, and Esteban decided to cheat on such a woman. Boarding began, and Valentina, along with everyone else, walked down the long jet bridge into the airplane cabin. At the entrance, passengers were greeted by two smiling flight attendants. She nodded in greeting, found her seat, and putting her carry-on in the overhead bin, sat down. The same man was already sitting next to her. Valentina gave him a cold look, smiled with the corners of her lips. He smiled back. What luck! Our seats turned out to be next to each other, he said. Valentina was amazed by the depth of his voice, soft like velvet with a low timbre. It seemed to envelop. She raised her head and met his gaze. For a brief moment they looked into each other's eyes, then she turned away. An attractive man, very. Not inferior to Esteban in the least. Is this luck for you? She asked indifferently. We don't know each other, do we? That's easily fixed, so the man replied and extended his palm to her. I'm Fernando. Valentina, she introduced herself for some reason. Your name is no less beautiful than you yourself, Fernando replied with a compliment. Valentina winced, but said nothing. She wasn't in the mood for either acquaintance or conversation. She fastened her seatbelt and, folding her hands on her knees, began to wait. The plane was taxiing to the runway. A pleasant female voice flowed from the speakers, explaining how to behave during takeoff. Turn off phones, bring the seat back to vertical position, raise the window shade. And where are you flying? Fernando spoke again. To the same place the plane is flying, Valentina threw out, trying to show with her whole appearance that she didn't want to talk. Is it possible to fly somewhere else while being on it? Fernando laughed. No, of course not. I meant not the destination. Then what? Purpose, Valentina sighed. Why do people fly to the sea? He shrugged. For different reasons. Well, you... Valentina turned her whole body toward him. Why are you flying there? For work. Well then, Valentina began and stopped short. She was expecting a different answer. And you, why? And I'm going to swim in the sea. I see, Fernando drawled. Sorry, I won't be able to keep you company. And it's not needed. They fell silent. Valentina closed her eyes, pretending to doze off. The plane shook slightly. Silence reigned in the cabin. Fernando took out his phone and began reading something. Valentina sighed with relief. Finally, he left her alone with his small talk. What kind of audacity is this anyway? to intrude when you see that a person isn't disposed to communication. She felt his interest in her as if through her skin. It was too obvious. Fernando kept glancing at her sideways, was about to speak again, but didn't dare. Valentina felt how he was painfully selecting a suitable topic, smiled to herself. For some reason, his awkwardness gave her pleasure. "What city are you going to?" He finally found a topic. "To Cartagena. Beautiful city. I was there last year vacationing. Very picturesque beaches. Have you been to the Rosario Islands? Were you vacationing there alone?" Valentina answered a question with a question. "Probably not alone." "With your wife?" She quickly glanced at his right hand. There was no ring. "Yes, alone. I advise you to visit the Rosario Islands. You won't regret it." They fell silent again. "I have some work there," Fernando began. "And after, if time permits, would you allow me to accompany you?" Valentina shook her head. "I'm married, and I wasn't planning to take you away from your husband," Fernando said gently. "I just wanted to keep you company, so to speak." Valentina suddenly thought, if Esteban was there with a mistress, what was stopping her from getting a lover, even if just for a week? She looked confidently at Fernando, smiled directly into his eyes. "You know what? Let's do it. Together is better than alone." "Exactly," Fernando beamed. He pulled a notebook from his pocket, boldly scribbled numbers on a sheet, and tearing it out, handed it to her. "This is my phone number. Call any time of day or night." "Certainly," Valentina promised and hid the sheet in her skirt pocket. "What kind of work do you have there at the resort?" "I'm a journalist," Fernando explained. "I'm going to conduct a journalistic investigation about one company and its dishonest schemes." "How interesting," Valentina exclaimed. "And I'm just a simple teacher of Spanish language and literature. My work is boring, but yours is just like in the movies. Scandals, intrigues, investigations." Fernando laughed cheerfully. "What are you saying, just as boring? I have to write a lot. I sit at my laptop for days tapping keys." "And you conduct investigations," Valentina teased him. "And investigations," Fernando nodded, "which are also boring to the point of gnashing teeth." They talked until landing. Fernando turned out to be a pleasant, interesting conversationalist, but Valentina didn't forget the purpose of her trip for a second. When they left the airport, her new acquaintance put her in a taxi, waved goodbye, and gestured, "Call me." Valentina nodded. The car started moving, pulled out of the parking lot, and rolled down the highway. The driver turned on music. Valentina looked without interest at the city landscapes flashing by, at people, houses, other cars. She took out her phone and wrote another message to her husband. Her heart was beating desperately, threatening to jump out of her chest any moment. Esteban replied in the same vein. "Just tons of work. No time even to eat properly." "Interesting. What kind of work? What does this work look like? Not some long-legged blonde with a languid voice?" For some reason, Valentina was already unequivocally sure. Her husband had another woman, and now he was resting with her in a hotel room. Otherwise, why didn't he tell the truth? Why did he lie? He definitely had something to hide. And it was hardly really work. The city greeted them with light rain. The sky was completely covered with clouds. Only at the very edge, above the horizon, a small piece of clear blue sky was visible. Strange, the Caribbean. But the weather was so gloomy. Although it was mid-May, a sharp, gusty wind was blowing. Palm trees were anxiously swaying their green crowns, as if before a thunderstorm. The taxi stopped at the entrance. The driver pulled Valentina's travel bag from the trunk, and she climbed the wide semicircle of the porch to the double glass doors. "Welcome," the administrator said politely. "Did you book a room?" Valentina nodded and handed him her passport across the counter. He opened it to the front page, clicked on the keyboard. "Yes, you have room 315 inches. Tell me, please, do you have Montoya staying here? Esteban Montoya? How is he related to you?" the administrator inquired in the same detachedly polite tone. "Yes, he's my husband. I'm Valentina Montoya." "You could just have the same last name," the administrator parried. "Well, I'll check." He clicked the keys again. "Yes, we have Esteban Montoya staying here, room 222. 222, Valentina repeated. Easy to remember. The administrator smiled. Have a pleasant stay. Valentina went up to her room, unlocked the door with the key card, and with relief kicked off her shoes. She threw her bag with things on the ottoman. Exhausted, she collapsed on the bed and immediately fell into a deep, sound sleep. In the morning, the weather was sunny. Valentina ordered a light breakfast and black coffee without sugar to her room. Her mood was bad. Esteban hadn't been answering messages since midday, although they were all read. Was he really that busy with his work? She wrote to Camilla, told her about everything in detail. Good thing you peeked at which hotel he had a reservation, her friend wrote. Otherwise, you'd be searching everywhere. Don't give up and chin up. Everything will be fine, I'm sure. A broadly smiling emoji. Valentina sent her an okay sign. She was planning to go downstairs and sit in the lobby. Sooner or later, she should see Esteban. Her heart trembled finally again, but Valentina resolutely told herself, I need to see everything with my own eyes. Learn the truth, however unsightly it may be. She had to wait a long time, about 2 hours. Valentina drank several cups of aromatic coffee, a small bottle of water, ate a pastry, and read about 3 long articles out of a dozen. But Esteban still didn't appear. When her patience was running out, she heard a familiar voice. She couldn't make out what exactly he was saying. She was sitting far from the door. She turned her head. Her husband was walking arm in arm with a tall brunette in dark glasses. Her cheeks flared up. There, finally she saw it. His work. And the work looked like herself. The same pageboy haircut, the same style of clothing, businesslike. The lady walked confidently on high heels, holding a patent black clutch with a golden clasp in her hand in a lace glove. Valentina greedily examined her, dressed expensively, elegantly, with taste, confident in herself. She walked with royal arrogance, measured, calm, smooth movements, regal posture, chin held high. Beautiful in the end, maybe more beautiful than Valentina. She seemed to radiate expensiveness and refinement and good breeding. Every movement was polished but effortless, refined. She clearly knew her worth and made an indelible impression. They approached the administrator's counter, spoke briefly about something, and moved toward the elevator. When the doors closed, Valentina hastily got up from the table and almost ran after them. Every second seemed like an eternity. She went up to the second floor, saw 2 retreating figures at the end of the corridor, slowed down. Esteban mustn't see her. They stopped at a door, the lock clicked barely audibly, and they disappeared. The door slammed. Valentina took off her shoes and silently crept to the room, stepping on tiptoe on the soft carpet. From behind the door came female laughter, Esteban's voice. Glasses clinked. Tears poured down Valentina's cheeks in a stream. Work for him, indeed. And how did he have the nerve? She threw her shoes on the floor with a loud clatter, put them on and strode down the corridor with wide steps. Call him right now and tell him everything? Or return home, wait for him, and then sort everything out, looking into his eyes. Valentina wiped away tears with the back of her hand again and again, but they kept rolling and rolling. Good thing her mascara was waterproof, or she would look like a panda now. In her room, she calmed down, tidied herself up, and called Camilla. She was silent on the phone for a long time. My condolences, she finally said. I never would have thought that your Esteban would stray. He's not mine anymore, Valentina stated firmly. I'll return home and file for divorce. Let him go to that one. Right, Camilla supported. You can't let something like this slide. I, honestly speaking, thought you would forgive him. Why is that? Because since you got together, you became somehow all soft. You melted like ice cream in a microwave and went blind as if... Apparently, I really did go blind. I wonder how long this has been going on behind my back. Since he started going on these business trips of his, it's obvious. He never went anywhere before, and suddenly there you have it. They started sending him constantly. Probably, Valentina didn't know what to say. I not only went blind, but deaf too. In the evening, she decided to go for a walk on the waterfront. If she had come here, why not look at the sea? She couldn't just think about this dirty betrayal. She really wanted to clear her head, feel the Caribbean breeze on her face, listen to the surf. The sound of waves calmed her nerves, slowed the rapid race of thoughts. Valentina sat down on a wide bench with a back and stared at the sea surface. Seagulls cried overhead. The sea washed the ancient fortress walls with hard foam. It broke into thousands of salty sprays. They sparkled like diamonds in the rays of the crimson sunset sun. "Valentina?" came a voice behind her. "Hello." Valentina turned around. Fernando was standing by the bench and looking at her with a smile, holding a cup of coffee in his hand. A seagull flew past, cried with a displeased voice, and the sea answered it with a soft rustle of waves. "Good evening," Valentina nodded. "May I sit down?" She turned away, showing that she didn't care. Suddenly, emptiness formed in her soul, pressed down like a heavy stone, flowed through her veins. What difference did it make what would happen next? Was it possible to live normally after what had happened? Number, only to exist at best. "How do you like it here?" Fernando asked, sitting down next to her. He took a sip from his cup. "I love the sea." Valentina was silent. The sun was already beginning to melt like red gold in the waters, and she took off her dark glasses. She wondered what Esteban was doing now. Having fun with that beauty, who for some reason looked so much like herself. A strange choice of mistress. "You look depressed," Fernando spoke again. "That's right," Valentina finally answered. And suddenly, unexpectedly, even for herself, she spilled everything out. She told the story from beginning to end. Pain rose in waves, overturned, dug into her heart with its merciless claws. But her eyes remained dry, and her voice detachedly indifferent and quiet. Fernando listened to her without interrupting. Valentina fell silent, stood up, straightened her skirt. "Let's go down to the water," she suggested. They slowly walked along the cobblestone waterfront. Valentina put her hand on the crook of Fernando's elbow, inhaled the aroma of his expensive perfume. He looked ahead, and she saw his profile sideways. Beautiful, chiseled, like that of a statue of a Greek god. She thought that if not for the circumstances, she could quite easily fall in love with him. They stopped at a coffee shop. They took 2 coffees to go. Valentina drank and couldn't seem to drink enough. She seemed to be quenching an indestructible pain with each new sip. She threw the empty cup in the trash and took a new one. People sat at tables standing on the street. Smiles flickered, fragments of conversations. Everyone was busy with their own life, and no one, absolutely no one, cared about Valentina's world collapsing before her eyes. "Tell me about your work," she asked Fernando. She wanted to be distracted. "Nothing interesting," he smiled with the corners of his lips. "I flew here for a journalistic investigation, as I already said. There's one local firm here engaged in shady schemes." "What kind?" Valentina inquired curiously. "A woman, owner of a shell company, enters into a contract for goods delivery," Fernando began explaining willingly. "But in fact, her firm can't transport anything, so she buys services from another firm, a real one, and pays it less than the supplier paid her. And then she makes fake documents for renting premises to store goods." "I don't understand anything." Valentina shook her head. "Why were the rental agreements fictitious?" "Because she didn't transport anything. Another company did everything. She didn't need any rental, but she arranged it, and de facto took the payment difference for herself." He was silent for a moment. "I've been following her for the 3rd day already. She's not alone, but with a man whose name I don't know, but I must find out. He's clearly her accomplice." Valentina finished her second cup of coffee. It had already gotten dark outside. The street lamps lit up. "Will you walk me to the hotel?" "Of course," Fernando responded readily. "It's a 10-minute walk from here." On the way, they continued discussing dishonest schemes. How do people have the nerve for such large-scale fraudulent machinations? Why don't they want to work honestly like others? Aren't they afraid of prison? "Probably they hope they'll manage to line their pockets and flee the country," Fernando reasoned. "Definitely," Valentina agreed. At the hotel porch, she turned to him, looked directly into his eyes. "Thank you for walking me." They stood in the thick shadow of a spreading palm tree, and Valentina could barely see Fernando's face. It seemed to her that he was smiling again. And suddenly, behind his back, she saw Esteban coming out of the hotel. He was leading his lady by the arm, dressed in a luxurious evening gown. They walked arm in arm to an expensive car waiting for them, and were arguing heatedly about something. The woman was frowning. Esteban looked angry, walked with wide steps, literally dragging her along and saying something irritably. "And there's my husband," Valentina said bitterly. Fernando turned around. "Your husband?" He was amazed. The couple got into the car, the doors closed softly, and it started moving, pulled out onto the roadway. "So that's—" Fernando began and stopped short, but then he spoke again immediately. "That's the very woman." "Which one?" Valentina didn't understand. "The one I told you about." It was Valentina's turn to be surprised. With widened eyes, she watched the black car drive onto the road, immediately slow down at a traffic light. Fernando rushed forward, holding Valentina by the hand. "You want to know the details of the betrayal," he said as they ran. "Now we'll find out." They ran up to a taxi standing at the entrance. Fernando yanked the back door and pushed Valentina forward. A second, and they found themselves in the darkness of the cabin. The driver turned around, phlegmatically looked at the two disheveled passengers. "Where to?" "That car. Do you see it?" Fernando pointed. "Follow it." "A chase, then." The driver sighed and started the engine. "I dreamed about this, that someone would jump in like this and ask me to pursue a car." Fernando was nervous. "Can you go faster?" They drove onto the road. The driver confidently stepped on the gas, and in 5 minutes they caught up with Esteban in his mistress's car. Valentina stared dumbfounded through the tinted glass. Well, so her husband, it turns out, was involved in some dishonest schemes. This was, as they say, a twist. She couldn't believe what was happening. Fernando pulled a camera from his bag and rapidly clicked the shutter. "The photos will be poor," Valentina said automatically. "The lighting isn't very good." "We'll figure it out later," Fernando waved her off. He was completely focused on the car driving next to them. They either drove slightly behind or caught up with it until they stopped at a restaurant. Esteban jumped out of the back seat and offered his hand to his mistress. Valentina and Fernando watched as they walked to the entrance. The lady, as always, walked confidently on thin stilettos. Fernando photographed their every step. "This will be magnificent material." He twisted some wheels on the camera, clicked buttons, and again put his eye to the camera. "I thought they wouldn't come out today." When Esteban and his companion disappeared behind the doors, Fernando, handing the driver a large bill, jumped out of the car. Valentina also got out after him. "What will we do next?" she asked. This adventure was beginning to captivate her. Adrenaline bubbled in her blood. She felt like a detective. "We'll take the most inconspicuous table," Fernando replied. They ran to the entrance. Valentina thought about what had happened until morning. Her agitated nerves wouldn't let her sleep. She lay with closed eyes and again imagined the same scene. Esteban takes his passion by the hand and leads her to dance, embraces her thin, flexible waist, and kisses her. Fernando sat nearby and constantly clicked the camera shutter, while Valentina seemed to go numb. She was deafened by shock and pain. It's one thing to know, another to see with your own eyes. Only now did she realize that she had hoped they were only connected by business relationships, that they were colleagues, maybe friends. But no, now she knew for certain. She asked herself the question, why? Again and again, and found no answer. "For money, it's obvious," Fernando exclaimed hotly. When on the way back from the restaurant, Valentina voiced her thoughts aloud. "It's clear as day. There may be some feelings there, but the main motive is money." "Yes," Valentina whispered brokenly and wiped away a tear. "This past year, he started earning much better. He said he got a promotion, that the business trip allowances were large. Generally speaking, he wasn't lying to you. Rather, he wasn't telling the whole truth." "And this woman, is it definitely her?" Valentina asked cautiously. "Definitely her." "What's her name?" Marisa Solano." Valentina took out her phone, opened the messenger. She wanted to write to her husband that she knew everything, but Fernando guessed, stopped her. "Don't. You'll tell him everything after their arrest." "Will they be arrested?" Valentina was stunned. Fernando nodded imperturbably. "Certainly. So she'll be the wife of a convict?" Valentina giggled nervously. She and Fernando were sitting in her hotel room. The velvet Caribbean night clung to the window like a black cat. Its darkness was diluted by the golden light of street lamps. Reflections of headlights from passing cars crawled across the glass. I sympathize with you, really, very much. But his voice sounded somehow indifferent. Valentina understood he was completely immersed in his journalistic activity and therefore simply couldn't fully sympathize. He was at work. She was in life. However, she wasn't expecting sympathy anyway. Heavy indifference was gradually rolling in, blurring all other feelings, making them faceless. What was the point of worrying? She couldn't change anything anyway. If you can solve a problem, then why worry? Camilla had once said. And if you can't solve a problem, then worrying is pointless. Remembering her friend, Valentina smiled. She liked Camilla's simple wisdoms, her optimistic attitude toward life, her ability to accept any difficulties and blows of fate calmly and steadfastly. If only she could be as brave and unbending. When Fernando left, Valentina called her. Camilla alternately laughed, held long pauses, and sincerely sympathized. I feel like I've been crushed by a stone, Valentina complained. I don't know what to do next. My life is simply destroyed at its root. After any storm, the sun peeks out, Camilla replied calmly. You just need to get through this, Valentina. And how beautifully he called me his queen, Valentina exclaimed bitterly. How much he promised. And he wanted children, a family. He said he loved me. All lies, all soap bubbles. And now she lay alone in an empty bed, and again mentally returned to the restaurant where her husband kissed another woman, Marisa Solano, who looked very much like Valentina Montoya. Valentina was present at the trial but didn't want to speak with Esteban. Fernando sat next to her, filmed the proceedings, and glanced sideways at his companion. Valentina felt so emptied that she simply had no strength left for any other emotions. She sat on the chair, hands folded on her knees, and stared straight ahead with a hateful gaze. The court sentenced Esteban and his mistress to 2 years in prison with the possibility of early release. That same day, Valentina filed for divorce. She knew that if her husband was in prison, they would grant it without problems. And so it happened. Leaving the courthouse, she pulled the wedding ring from her finger and clenched it in her fist, slowly wandered along the sidewalk. Hot summer was already raging in full force. The sun flooded the street with its unbearably bright light. Valentina asked Esteban just one question that had tormented her throughout this entire time. Why? He looked into her eyes but didn't answer anything. Marisa was also silent, and only when the guards were leading him away, he suddenly turned around and shouted, I did everything for you, Valentina. For you! Fernando put his arm around her waist. Valentina buried her forehead in his shoulder. She no longer wanted to cry. She didn't want anything at all, neither to take revenge, nor to wait for her husband, nor to start a new life. What was the point of it all? A waste of time. From now on, her soul was dead and buried, right here, in the courtroom where they had just announced the verdict. Maybe I just never really loved him, she asked. After all, loved ones are forgiven. Nonsense, Fernando said confidently. It's impossible to forgive betrayal. Now she was free, against her will, and Esteban was not free and also against his will. Yes, fate sometimes turns an unexpected side. At the automatic sliding doors of the supermarket sat a hunched old woman in a Panama hat with a paper cup in her trembling, gnarled fingers. Walking by, Valentina threw the wedding ring in there. That's it. Her former life was over. What would the new one be like, and would there be one at all? Camilla came to visit that same day. Again, she brought a bottle of red wine. When Valentina was taking glasses from the cabinet, her gaze caught on Esteban's coffee mug. She clenched her teeth. She needed to immediately collect all his things and take them out of the apartment, so that nothing, no little thing would remind her of this traitor. Valentina snatched the mug and threw it forcefully on the floor. It broke into several pieces. Camilla jumped up in her chair in fright and stared at Valentina. Why are you breaking dishes? Certainly not for good luck, Valentina replied spitefully. That was Esteban's mug. She took a broom and dustpan, swept up the pieces and threw them in the trash. You're something, Camilla laughed. Such a calm, well-bred lady from a good family, a teacher. She raised her index finger, and suddenly smashing mugs. You're just like a hot-blooded Mexican. I didn't know you had such a fiery temperament. I have an ordinary temperament. I just don't want his things to be here. She rushed to the bedroom, yanked open the closet door, and dumped all of Esteban's things on the floor. She brought bags, crammed them in there in a lump. She muttered curses through her teeth and at the same time wondered, where did she even know such words? She was swearing so that a dock worker would be envious. Following the clothes, books, magazines, notebooks, pens, a comb, a shaving mirror, a toothbrush, and a washcloth flew into the bag. Valentina gathered everything she found, completely clean, then walked around the apartment once more. Camilla watched her actions with interest. You're showing your unexpected sides, she noted. Uh-huh, Valentina nodded and stuck her feet into rubber flip-flops. I'll just throw this out and come back. With a feeling of deep satisfaction, she threw the bag into the garbage bin, grimaced. Instead of despair and shock, she felt anger. Huge, all-consuming, frightening. Her head spun sickeningly. Interesting. Had they notified Esteban in prison that he was now divorced? Or was he cherishing an empty hope for restoring their relationship after his release? God, what a fool you'd have to be to get mixed up in all this. Did money really cloud his judgment so much, eclipse everything? What will you do about the accounts? Camilla inquired when she returned. He had a lot of money lying there. All accounts are frozen, Valentina explained, and he transferred almost nothing to mine. Everything was seized from him and Solano. They managed to take some abroad. That will be for his life after he gets out of prison. Will you live on a teacher's salary? Do I have another choice? Valentina bristled. No. Well, I could, of course, go into another field, make money as they say, but somehow I don't want to change professions so drastically. Why did you decide you have no choice? Camilla laughed. Charm your journalist. What's his name? I just looked up information about him. He's quite well known. Works on television. So what? Valentina replied irritably. I don't want to charm anyone. I need to at least come to my senses a bit after all this chaos. Of course, Camilla raised her hands. I understand you, but take a closer look at the journalist. Certainly, Valentina smiled crookedly. I'll start right tomorrow. And suddenly she wondered, did she like Fernando? She definitely liked him. She felt it, understood it, the way any woman feels male sympathy. After hesitating, she came to the conclusion that yes, she liked him, but she still wasn't ready to start new relationships. And God only knew when she would be ready. Too strong a storm had passed through her life, destroying everything in its path. A week later, a message suddenly came from Esteban. Valentina was surprised. How did he have a phone there? She opened the chat. I didn't expect such betrayal from you. You were my queen, my empress. I wanted children from you, and now I can't even think about you. The message came from an unfamiliar number, but Valentina immediately understood who it was. He still had the audacity to accuse her of betrayal. She quickly typed a reply. Now Marisa Solano will be your queen, the one you got involved with for money. One checkmark appeared in the corner of the message and froze there. Valentina waited another couple of weeks, then deleted the chat. Apparently they gave him a phone once to write to her. One of his cellmates. Valentina had heard that sometimes they passed prohibited things from the outside, hiding them in bread or other baked goods. And a week later, Fernando suddenly called her, suggested meeting, having coffee together, and Valentina agreed. Their communication flowed into romance so simply and naturally that Valentina didn't notice it. When she came to the meeting place for the first time, Fernando was waiting for her with a small bouquet of white roses. She gratefully accepted the flowers. He offered her his arm. Maybe it's low, trying to please a lady who has just experienced difficult events. But I will try, he said. Why? Valentina laughed in surprise. I liked you right away, even on the plane. Do you believe that love at first sight exists? No? I didn't believe it either. With Fernando, it was easy and calm. They chatted about everything under the sun, drank coffee, smiled at each other, lightly touching fingers. They only avoided one topic, Esteban and Marisa. By silent agreement, they closed this page of their lives, which had amazingly brought them together. And Valentina didn't notice how a new person was gradually entering her life. Fernando turned out to be an interesting, understanding conversationalist. He knew how to listen and hear and could support seemingly any topic. Valentina was falling in love. Not like a young girl, no, quite the opposite. Her feeling was deliberate. It was maturing, waiting for its time. It didn't arise suddenly. And she was sure that Fernando reciprocated, because he had said so directly himself, without any unnecessary embarrassment. We're adults, and I wouldn't want all this beating around the bush. If two adults are attracted to each other, then they should decide whether it's worth moving to the next stage of the relationship. What stage? Valentina didn't understand. Wedding, Fernando said. They fell silent, looking into each other's eyes. What? Just like that? Fernando shrugged. Why not? I'm telling you, we're adults. Well, no, I can't do that, Valentina stubbornly refused. From marriage to marriage? Somehow that's, I don't know, improper. I won't pressure you, Fernando shook his head. I'll just wait for your decision. I'll probably never agree, Valentina thought. After Esteban, after all this nightmare, I won't be able to forget this for a long time and won't be able to decide on this very new stage for a long time. But unexpectedly for herself, she decided, and quite soon, in just a year. The wounds were already healing, the emptiness in her soul filled with new emotions and feelings. The shock and numbness from the suddenness of events had passed. And all this time, Fernando was beside her, supported, helped, sympathized, although this was no longer required, at least not like before. Valentina seemed to surface after a long stay underwater, saw bright light, breathe air with full lungs. Colors and joy returned to her life. From former resentments and anxieties, only gray cold ashes remained. She had nurtured her pain, nursed it, carefully carrying it in her arms, and it disappeared, dissolved in everyday life, lost among daily concerns. And now Valentina became truly free. Several times Fernando stayed overnight at her place. Isn't this a new stage of the relationship? She asked coquettishly, propping herself up on her elbow and looking into his eyes. Now we're really close. I would say this is a small stage on the way to a big one, Fernando answered seriously. Valentina fell back on the pillow and sighed dreamily. You know, I once thought on the sea that I could fall in love with you if I weren't married. He was silent for a moment. Well, now you're not married. Did you fall in love with me? If I didn't love you, you wouldn't be lying here next to me now. Valentina laughed. Well, that's quite logical. Fernando laughed back and turned his head on the pillow. You know what, Valentina? I won't pressure you not only in terms of making decisions about our relationship, but in general about nothing and never. Really? Valentina was theatrically surprised and covered her mouth with her palm. Wow! What exactly do you mean? And she squinted, looking at him. She wanted to play with him, but he was extremely serious. I mean our future family life. I will never pressure you, even when you become my lawful wife. Why are you so sure I'll be your lawful wife? Valentina parried and began reasoning. What if I'm for free relationships or for visiting marriage? What if I don't want to see men in my life at all? What would you do then? Fernando laughed. Well, you're being sly. Well, yes, Valentina agreed. But purely hypothetically, what would you do in such cases? Fernando thought a little. I would start playing by your rules. But the idea of forcing you to do something would never occur to me. You know, I've long wanted to tell you. He sat up in bed and turned to her. I was married once too. We separated because of the absence of children. I don't know which of us couldn't conceive, but the fact is the fact. So I thought I truly loved Lucia and that I could never love someone as strongly again. But I was wrong. He took Valentina's hand in his and squeezed her fingers slightly, looking at her with a smile. Valentina pulled it away, also sat up, smoothed her hair. Her mood dropped sharply. I want to tell you too, she said sharply. I can't have children. Official diagnosis, infertility, and I'm unlikely to ever be cured. Fernando blinked. This doesn't affect my decision to tie my life to yours in any way. Children are great, but they're not the main thing. Well, that's only for you to decide. Valentina smiled grimly. Valentina and Fernando decided to have a church wedding after their civil marriage registration. One day this idea just came to one of them, and the other approved. They were spouses before the law, and now they had to become spouses before God too. Tears stood in Valentina's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away with her free hand. All she needed was to burst into tears at her own wedding like a teenage girl. The smell of incense unpleasantly tickled her nostrils. When the wedding ceremony was over, bells rang loudly and joyfully. Fernando led Valentina by the hand, and she looked at him and thought, not only before people, but before God too. How strange all this was, to meet a much stronger love precisely at the moment when you lose the old one. The photographer walked behind them and captured every step. Fernando wanted this significant and huge event to be captured in detail, but Valentina barely noticed him. So much had happened in her life in the last 2 years. The baptism alone was worth something. Her parents had left the choice of religion to their daughter, and she had left this question open. She had never been devoutly religious and didn't consider it necessary to be baptized. All this is needed for people, she reasoned. But why for God? Would God, who is almighty, really not accept and see a soul without baptism? But for the church wedding that Valentina so wanted, it was necessary to be baptized. And now Valentina felt different. Not like before. Something had changed in her soul after baptism. From now on, you are mine forever, Fernando said when they went outside. Before everyone. Don't you regret it? Valentina turned to him. How can I regret it? I love you. And I love you. They walked down the steps arm in arm. The sun shone in their eyes, and burgundy and white roses bloomed in the church courtyard. Valentina looked at the spring-high sky and smiled quietly. A new chapter of her life had begun. No, not a chapter. A whole new volume. Camilla was chattering something joyfully, treating guests to pastries and rum, arranging them all for a group photo. Valentina hardly listened to her, occupied with her own thoughts. Fernando also looked absorbed in himself. They both felt this something, exciting and frightening in its unexploredness, alluring and enticing. They were like two children who were given a box with a gift. What's in there? What will happen next? And there was also firm certainty that whatever happened, nothing bad could happen, because they were together, hand in hand, together, forever and everywhere. And ahead was only joyful, bright, and happy. 6 months later, Valentina, returning from work, began preparing dinner. On the way home, she bought shrimp and now wanted to bake them in wine sauce. A bottle of wine was hidden in the cabinet in case of an unexpected visit from Camilla. Valentina pulled it out, found a corkscrew and stuck it into the cork, screwed it in. She opened the package with shrimp. An unpleasant, seemingly rotten smell hit her nose. Nausea instantly rolled up to her throat in a disgusting, sticky lump. Realizing she couldn't hold back, Valentina rushed to the bathroom. The smell of raw shrimp threw her off balance, and she was afraid to go into the kitchen to remove them from the table. Therefore, when Fernando returned from work, she asked him to do it. Fernando looked intently at her face. Are you all right? Valentina nodded, throwing out irritably. Yes, just take them somewhere far away, please. I can even smell that aroma here. It makes me sick. Throw them out. As you say, Fernando mumbled. Returning from the kitchen, he began putting on his shoes. Did you throw them out? Put them in the freezer. They won't bother you there. Where are you going? To the pharmacy. I think I need to urgently buy something. With these words, he left Valentina alone again. She sat down on the ottoman in the hallway, trying to calm the persistent nausea. What was this? What to do about it? Returning, Fernando handed her a pregnancy test. Valentina looked questioningly first at it, then at her husband. Fernando, you know I can't have children. Take it. Nothing will fall off if you take it. No, but why? Take it, Fernando insisted. Valentina carefully read the instructions on the package, although she already knew how to use the test. She pointed with her finger. Look, it says here that you need to do it in the morning, and now it's evening. Fernando peered at the small print. No, Valentina, it says here that morning gives a more accurate result, by some tenths of a percent. That's not critical. Do it now. All right then, Valentina gave in. She did everything exactly according to the instructions, put the test on a horizontal surface, and began to wait. The first strip appeared earlier, then the second began to slowly appear. With each passing second, it became clearer and clearer. Valentina carefully, with her fingertips, took the test, as if she could scare away this sudden happiness, and handed it to Fernando. He smiled broadly. But how? Valentina wondered. I have infertility. It's a miracle, Fernando answered seriously. After the wedding. God heard us, saw us. This is his gift for our wedding. He picked up Valentina in his arms and spun her around, shouting, A gift! A gift! Valentina laughed heartily, throwing back her head. Now they would definitely be happy.